A house on the Gulf of Mexico costs about half of what the same house costs in Palm Beach. But what does that spread actually buy you? That one number explains the 10 best places to live in Florida this year. I am Roy Baker, a Florida real estate agent who has spent 20 years pricing these towns, and what follows is the map I pencil out for buyers who call my office. But the market tells you the story in numbers, not in slogans, so that is how I will give it to you. The truth is, most people who relocate here pick the wrong end of the state, and they find out at the insurance renewal when the premium arrives and the budget that worked on paper suddenly does not. I have walked the listings on both coasts, and the answer depends on which end you shop, because the same money buys twice the house on the Gulf and a flood zone with a view on the other. Remember that spread never fully closes, it only moves, and chasing it is how the smart money shops this state. My method never changes. 3 numbers, the median sale price, the insurance reality, and the flood zone, because those 3 decide whether a town is livable or just photographed well. Let me be straight with you before we start, because this is not a cheap list. Some of these towns are expensive on purpose, and the truth is the best places to live in Florida are rarely the best places to hunt a bargain, and pretending otherwise is how people end up house poor in a town they quietly regret. Consider it a fairness warning, not a sales pitch. Tell me where in Florida you are watching from, and give me the county too, because I read every comment, and the locals keep me honest. 10 towns, 5 regions, 2 each, from the Panhandle down to the money end of the Gulf. People ask me, Roy, where would you live if the price did not matter? I always give the same answer, and that answer is sitting at number 1, so hold that thought. The countdown starts at the western edge of the state. Number 10 is Pensacola, where the median sale price sits near $365,000. And that single number is why the city keeps landing on national affordability lists. But here is what those lists skip. Pensacola owns some of the whitest sand in the country. The home base of the Blue Angels sits at the Naval Air Station on the bay, and the Aviation Museum there is one of the largest of its kind anywhere. Downtown Palafox Street walks like a city that costs twice as much, and the restaurants act like it too, in the good sense. The Blue Angels practice over the bay most weeks, and the whole city stops mid-sentence and looks up, which tells you the town still admires the place it lives in. However, the discount exists for a reason: hurricane exposure at the top of the Gulf, and an economy that rises and falls with military spending. Which means you buy Pensacola for the value and the water, not for a resale record. Remember the order of operations here. The insurance quote comes before the offer, because a cheap house carrying a brutal premium is not a cheap house. Number 9 sits east along the coast, Santa Rosa Beach, the stretch everybody calls 30A after the scenic county highway that threads it. The median in that zip code runs about $952,000, and consider what that means: a panhandle price competing with famous coastal cities hundreds of miles to the south. What makes 30A different sits behind the beach, rare coastal dune lakes that exist in only a handful of places on Earth, and planned towns like Seaside, where the film The Truman Show was shot. The names change every few miles: Seaside, Watercolor, Rosemary Beach, and each one sells a slightly different mood at a slightly different price. Turns out the planners got the big thing right. The architecture obeys the dunes instead of flattening them, and the height limits actually stuck, decade after decade. Not just a beach town, a designed one, with state parks bookending the whole stretch, and the price per square foot reflects the design. Here is the honest catch, and it is not the storm, it is the summer traffic on that one scenic highway, which is the real toll you pay for living inside the postcard. Now pull inland, because Central Florida is more than the space between 2 coasts. Number 8 is Mount Dora, median near $420,000, an hour from Orlando and a century away in rhythm. But here is the fact that changes the insurance conversation. The old town sits on one of the highest ridges in peninsular Florida, high ground in a state that barely has any, so the flood zone talk is nothing like the coast. Remember, the calendar is real: sailboat regattas on Lake Dora and an antique market complex big enough that dealers set their year around it. The lighthouse on the downtown waterfront is decorative rather than working, and that tells you everything about the pace here. And that is when a fair number of my Central Florida buyers stop scrolling beach listings and start looking at maps. But think about what a lakeside porch and a walkable main street cost anywhere else on this list. Then look at that median again, and you will understand why the Orlando crowd keeps the secret quietly. Number 7 is Winter Park, and at a median near $800,000, it is the priciest town this far inland on my list. What makes it worth the number? Rollins College at the center, brick streets, a chain of lakes, and Park Avenue, a shopping street that would hold its own in a city 10 times the size. But here is what the price tag hides. The museum on that same street holds one of the great Tiffany glass collections in the world, chapel and all. And locals stroll past it on Sundays like it is nothing. There is a boat tour that has been working those lakes since the 1930s, and it is still the best $12 in Florida. Winter Park is priced out loud, and it does not apologize for it. But the question is whether you want the address or the square footage, because at this median, you are choosing, and the market makes you say it out loud. If this map is saving you a weekend of bad internet searches, subscribing is the one thing that keeps real Florida numbers coming. No hype, just the medians. Now the Atlantic side, the Old Coast. Number 6 is Vero Beach. Median about $385,000. The quiet one of the Treasure Coast. Turns out the name is literal. A Spanish treasure fleet went down offshore in 1715, and divers still bring up silver from those wrecks 3 centuries later. What makes Vero different is restraint. Low rise, beachside, no spring break economy. A town that runs on citrus groves and returning snowbirds rather than nightclubs. And yet the median says an ordinary buyer can still get in under $400,000, barely, which is becoming rare on this coast, and the town knows it. Remember what restraint protects. The same beach the big money builds towers on an hour south, here lined with sea grapes and public walkways, because the locals voted to keep it that way. Turtle nesting season closes stretches of that sand at night in summer, and the town defends the rule like a covenant. Number 5, St. Augustine, the oldest continuously settled city in the country. Founded in 1565, median near $430,000. The truth is, most first-time visitors expect that number to be double. The old town earns the attention. A stone fort called the Castillo de San Marcos has guarded the inlet since the 1600s, and the railroad hotel Henry Flagler built is now a college in the middle of downtown. Remember the tourist math before you buy inside the historic district. Summer crowds are the price of the charm, but 5 minutes west the streets go quiet, and the prices behave. Not just a monument with a gift shop, a working small city wrapped around one. Consider the commute math too. Jacksonville sits 40 minutes up the road, which is how a lot of locals afford the address. But remember what you are really shopping for here, because the oldest city in the country sells history at a new build price, and only you know whether that trade pencils out. Now the retirement gulf, and here comes the block everyone argues about. Number 4 is Venice, median around $409,000. And here is the fact every local leads with. The beaches are called the shark tooth capital of the world, and people bend over every single morning and pick up fossilized teeth from sharks that swam here millions of years before any of us. What makes Venice read like Italy is the plan itself. The town was designed in the 1920s as a planned community with an Italianate downtown, so the avenues bend toward the water instead of toward the highway, and a paved trail runs the waterfront for miles. A retired couple I worked with narrowed their entire search to Venice and one other town on this list, and by the second showing the wife was calling me Roy, which is how I knew we were getting close. But here is the part that decided it. They penciled out both markets, insurance and all, and chose Venice for the walkable downtown and the golf cart rhythm. A year later they told me they had made the right call, and I believed them, because they had stopped looking at listings. But that is when you know a town fits, when the searching stops. Number 3 is Sarasota, median about $588,000, the culture capital of the Gulf. The Ringling family ran their winter circus empire from here, and the complex they left behind holds a serious art collection, their actual waterfront mansion, and a bayfront garden that locals treat like a second porch. But here is what the median hides. The beaches, Siesta Key in particular, keep winning national rankings on the strength of quartz sand so white it stays cool underfoot in August. Which means you are bidding against people who could live anywhere, and the market acts like it. Imagine the summer gridlock on the Keys, then price it in, because the same sand that wins the awards fills the bridge on a Saturday in season, every single season. Remember too, that the culture works both ways, because the same stage that hosts world-class performers in season goes quiet in September. And that is the honest calendar of a festival town. 2 towns left, the money end, and the reveal I promised. Number 2 is Jupiter, on the Atlantic in the southeast, median about $682,000. The lighthouse at the inlet went up in 1860, and it still sweeps the water at night, and the river behind it is federally protected wild and scenic water, one of the few in the state. The truth is, Jupiter is where the rich southeast coast finally exhales. Fishing boats, family compounds, spring training baseball, and a median that runs 6 figures under Palm Beach just down the same road. The market tells you the discount is real, and remember, this is the very comparison that opened this video. Not just a discount though, a different daily life, because Jupiter keeps a working waterfront in a county famous for yachts, and that balance is the rarest thing on this coast. But consider what 6 figures of savings buys down that same road. Because the distance from Jupiter to Palm Beach is short in miles and enormous in property tax bills. And that is the trade laid bare. And number one is the town from my first sentence, the retirement Gulf winner, Naples, where the median runs about $1,450,000, still roughly half of Palm Beach at $2.6 million. But here is what that money actually buys. The whitest sand in the state. A pier the whole town treats like a front porch. A downtown on Fifth Avenue that trades like a small city, and an art scene that punches far above one town's weight. The truth is, Naples is not cheap, and I warned you at the start that some picks would be expensive on purpose. But remember the three numbers: median, insurance, flood zone, and Naples passes all three better than anywhere else on this list. I watched a renewal notice land on a client's table there after a hard hurricane season, and the premium had jumped enough that we penciled out the entire move one more time. They stayed. But that is when you know a town is real. When the hardest bill of the year arrives and the owners do not flinch. I would put my own money on Naples, and the honest version is that I already have. So that is the map: 10 towns, 5 regions, and an argument starter in every corner of the state. Roy, my clients tell me, you always end up picking the expensive ones, and I answer, no. I pick the towns where the numbers still hold a decade later, and the expensive ones just happen to survive that test more often. But the story is not finished. The next episode is already on the calendar for August 29th, the cheapest and the safest towns in Florida. The medians under 300,000, where the crime numbers actually behave, and I will run the same 3 numbers on every single one of them. But if your town did not make my list today, good. That is exactly what the comments section is for, and the locals always sharpen the map. Until then, keep an eye on the renewal. Pencil out your own 3 numbers before you fall in love with a photograph. Walk the streets before you sign anything. And I will see you down the coast.